Greetings, everyone. My name is Alex Cornelius, and I'm the director of the Center for Women's and Gender Studies. And you're joining us here today for our program of the War in Ukraine, Gender and Poetry. Again, I'd like to thank Dr. Rebecca Friedman, who first approached me with the idea of doing this, the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab and Center for Women and Gender Studies, kind of creating a forum where we could have people come in and talk about gendered experience, gendered perspectives regarding the war in Ukraine. As many of you know, poetry, of course, has always been at the center of women's and gender studies, both as a theory and as a practice. Poetry is the means through which, as a theory, we try to make sense of the great conflicts of our times. It's also a practice because we use poetry as a means of expressing ourselves, articulating our perspectives, and also as a source of healing. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the conversation now to Dr. Rebecca Friedman. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome to everyone. I'm Rebecca Friedman. Thank you, first of all, so much to our three poets for being here today, and thank you to my colleagues. Before introducing our three guests today, I want to pause on the meaning of May 9th, or a meaning of May 9th. May 9th, as you all know, is so-called Victory Day in the Soviet context. It's the day that marks the Soviet victory in World War II. It's the day that still serves as a national holiday throughout Russian territories and beyond. It is the day where in 2019, the last time I myself was in Moscow, I overheard a little girl on her father's shoulders pointing at the tanks rolling down Tverskaya Boulevard in a practice parade in celebration of Soviet might, shouting, "Papa, Papa, какие красивые танки," oh, Papa, Papa, what beautiful tanks, over and over again. This child, atop her father's shoulders, was already ensconced in narratives of Russian military might, of Russian nationalism in the past and in the present. Today, our today, of course, is not about the Soviet Union. It's not about the victory over Nazism and the nationalist fortress that Putin built so many moons ago. It does, though, give us pause on this day, Victory Day, and today's particular twisted and butchered meaning of that phrase. Today, though, in this moment now, is a celebration of Ukraine, of its statehood, its sovereignty, its strength, its women, its children, and most of all, of its poetry and of its poets. So thank you all, audience, and thank you especially to our poets for being here today. Allow me now to introduce our three poets. First, we have Yuliya, who's been with us before, Yuliya Kolchinsky Dasbach, who emigrated from Dnipro, Ukraine as a Jewish refugee in 1993 when she was only 6 years old. She is the author of three poetry collections, The Many Names for Mother, winner of the Wick Poetry Prize, Kent State University Press 2019, finalist for the Jewish Book Award, Don't Touch the Bones 2020, winner of the 2019 Idaho Poetry Prize, and 40 Weeks, forthcoming from Yes, Yes Books, I love that, in 2023. Her poems appear in Poetry, Blackbird, American Poetry Review, and The Nation, among others. She holds an MFA from the University of Oregon and a PhD in Comparative Literature and Literary Theory from the University of Pennsylvania. Her dissertation, Lyric Witness, Intergenerational Recollection of the Holocaust in Contemporary American Poetry, pays particular attention to the underrepresented atrocity in the former Soviet territories. She's founder and host of Words Together, Worlds Apart, a virtual poetry reading series born out of the pandemic, but meant to outlast it. She's currently Murphy Visiting Fellow in Poetry at Hendrix College and lives in Little Rock, Arkansas, with her 2 kids, cat, dog, and husband. She also, I added this at the end of your formal biography, is author of the Dear Ukraine poem that goes live today, and she will tell us a lot more about this at the end of our program, or at the, yeah, I think that's right. We also have with us Anna Gruver, a Ukrainian poet and essayist born in 1996 in Donetsk. She is author of the 2019 book of poems. I apologize, I know Russian, but not Ukrainian, so I'm gonna bastardize, but try. Za вашим запитом ничего, I get that right? Не знайдено. Nothing was found at your request. Her poems have been translated into English, Polish, Hebrew, Romanian, Lithuanian, and Russian, and have been published in particular in the journal Show, F-Letter, in the media sites, Lit Center, Solodneva, and in other fora. Gruver translates essays and contemporary poetry from Ukrainian into Polish and vice versa. She translated a book by Katie Ferris, Boys, Girls, from English into Ukrainian, 2021. In 2019, Honor received third prize in the prestigious Smolotsk literary competition for young writers. She's co-editor of the bilingual poetry journal Paradigma. Gruver also published interviews with famous Ukrainian writers such as Luba this is challenging me, Yakimchuk, Irina Shuvalova, Osip Slivinsky, Oksana Litsushina, and she is studying Hebrew studies at the Jagiellonian University. Before the 2022 war, Anna lived in Kharkiv and Kiev. She remains at present in Ukraine. Yuliya Charnyshova, a Belarusian poet and a researcher of Anglophone and Slavonic poetry of the 20th and 21st century, is also here with us today. She was born in Minsk in 1998 and is now living in Lviv, Ukraine. Her work in Russian and English has appeared in the Los Angeles Review of Books, Words Without Borders as a co-translator, and F. Pismo, among other forums. She's also the editor of Daniil Zadoroshny's bilingual, written in Ukrainian and Russian poetry book, Nezbyechny Formy Bliskosti. That was definitely Russian. Dangerous Forms of Intimacy, Dnipro Press 2021. Phew. Thank you so much. Heartfelt thank you to each of you for being here today. I turn it over to you, Yuliya. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Rebecca. Thank you, dear poets, for being with us from Ukraine. We're going to begin with Anna. Anna, I would love if you would start us off by reading in Ukrainian, and then I will read the translation that I had the pleasure of working on with you of your poem.
Thank you. And the first one, poem. Одна з нас дихає на замерзле зимове яблучко, заколисує його, як вміє, та як не вміє, зморщене від плачу, морозне, бліде, біле. У раю такими яблучками годуватимуть, її ж не хочу, скільки витримують загробілля зі скапками лопати долонь. Чунями переступає, а на лобі палає ліхтарик, аби висвітлити шлях, де чути скрегіт коліщаток. На глибині шахти видобувають чорний жіночий біль. Палаючи, він віддає тепло, перетворюється на золоті зуби, золоті годинники, золото, золото, золото. Ненажерлива держава зверху потребує більше болю, і коли птахи відлітають у вирій, її не беруть на крила. Не жіноча ця справа, шахтарська справа. Так ще бабця казала, штовхаючи вагонетку. Прабабуся казала, штовхаючи вагонетку до раю, ніби Єва штовхала вперед вагонетку жіночого болю усередині чорного животу вугільної шахти, замерзлого зимового яблучка з землі, в одній темряві, в одній з нас.
It's so haunting to hear that. She is one of us, breathing on a frozen winter apple, lulling it as she's able and as she isn't, the apples wrinkled from crying, frosted pale white. She will eat her fill of apples in paradise. How many will the rough shovels of her palms endure? Stepping over, and a flashlight burns on her forehead. illuminating the path where you hear wheels squeak at the depths of the mine. They extract women's black pain, which radiate heat transformed into gold teeth, a gold watch, gold, gold, gold. The insatiable state above needs more pain. And when the birds fly away into the vortex, they do not take her on their wings. This woman's work is not a woman's work. So the grandmother said, pushing the trolley. Great grandmother said, pushing a trolley to paradise, as if Eve was pushing a woman's pain trolley forward. Inside a coal mine's black belly, the ground's frozen winter apple. Inside one darkness, inside one of us.
Thank you for your translation, Yuliya, very much. And the next one. Жодна з нас не знає, як позбутися страху перед світлофором, що підморгує червоним на порожньому перехресті, тіні кущів і димчаста тінь пішохода у капюшоні проводжають до самого будинку. У щасливому випадку за зачиненими дверима із дзеркала ліфту дивляться зіниці, розширені від неминучої зустрічі з черговим незнайомцем. Вартові охоронці нічної небезпеки не сплять. Дихання вартових наздоганяє у ванні при спробі змити відбитки дотиків поглядів і зняти захисну шкіру тонким лезом. Біля вікон у лікарнях, у примірочних з однаковим одягом різного розміру, черги, соцслужби, зупинки, офіси, відділення поліції, звідусюди зустрічаються зіниці. У них на дні безсилля, злість, страждання, боротьба і жахлива ніжність. Зазирніть і побачите, як насилля не відбувається з жодної з нас, не відбувається у провулках, пролісках, всередині, ззовні. Вбивство не відбувається з жодної з нас, з будь-якою із нас відбувається. Кожна з нас повинна, жінка зобов'язана, вона мусить, ти одна з нас.
She is none of us. Doesn't know how to get rid of the fear of traffic lights winking red at an empty intersection, shadows of bushes and the smoky shadow of a hooded pedestrian trailing her to the house. Happily cased behind closed doors, pupils look out from behind an elevator's mirror, dilated at an unavoidable meeting with another stranger. The night watchmen do not sleep. The breath of guards catches up to her in the bathroom while trying to wash away prints of eye contact and remove the protective layer of skin with a thin blade. Near the windows, in hospitals, in fitting rooms with the same clothing of different sizes, lines of social service offices, police stations, pupils peer everywhere. At their depths, powerlessness, spite, suffering, struggle, and terrible tenderness. Take a look and see how violence does not happen to any one of us, does not happen in the alleys of snowdrops, inside, outside. Murder does not happen to any one of us. It happens to any of us. Each one of us must, a woman must, she must, you are one of us. And now, Yuliya.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll read a poem of mine, but before that, I'll make a very brief and pretty obvious disclaimer that I'm not a Ukrainian poet. I'm a poet living in Ukraine, and that's important to me to know that, because the thing that I least want to do is to take up some space designated for Ukrainian voices and voices of Ukrainian poets. And I am immensely grateful for this invitation to this series of events with the work that it does in spreading the awareness internationally, and to be reading in the company of Anna, who I personally am fond of as a writer, and I'm very pleased to be here with you and with Julia. And the experience I share is the experience of a poet who is living in Ukraine, who's been forced to leave Belarus due to the safety issues and the persecutions against my loved ones, and who found shelter in Ukraine. And it was the best place for me to live in a democratic, safe surrounding before Russian full-scale invasion became part of our reality, and also part of reality of me and my family, because my husband is Ukrainian and all of his family is Ukrainian. And that's an experience of our family encapsulated, and also of me as a poet and translator from Ukrainian language that I'm learning now at the moment, not yet very fluent in, but that's Danik. Danik says hi. Danik is a Ukrainian poet and journalist, and my husband, apparently. So the poem I'll read now, it's been my reaction to the news about the world's largest cargo ship, Maria, that got burned down by Russian troops back in March. And the name of this largest airplane in the world translates dream in English. And that's about how that dream burned down. It's also been a reaction of mine to some of the people I've known from Belarus and Russia, because I've had many connections to people there. And when the full-scale war started, sometimes this conversation became very disappointing, because not everyone was very engaged in what was happening. And at some point, when you're living in Ukraine and you have no intention of living it, and you decided to stay there, when you get one more message with wishing you strength from someone who considers themselves to be living safely in Russia, and that's the only thing they do to express their intention, just to say, hope you're well, and that's it. That is why the poem will be a bit aggressive, but I believe that can be quite reasonable at the moment. I had a dream, though it burned down in some hangar by now. Now the best thing is the one that's wide open. Open the window during an air alarm as wide as you can, just to hear that the alarm wasn't real. You imagined it all. Please stop sending me wishes of staying strong over here. I allow you to take strength yourself and use it for the purpose intended. This strength here is as careless as gifts that my second home made for me for my 24th birthday. An airstrike hitting a training center 30 kilometers from our house, 35 dead, 134 wounded. Mariupol maternity hospital bombing, 3 dead, 17 wounded. And my partner lying in bed with COVID fever all day after the night of volunteering. But the motherland #1 surprised all of us most, as it always was good at. Giving my gift to my then classmate, now persecutor, she got a promotion. Starting from the position in my city's area, she took my city entirely. Ooh, it coincided with her day of birthday. Each media outlet had it wrong on that day when they called her 23 years old. Just like that, elegant gestures are not alien to the regime. Delicate wash, baby clothes, thrown out on the no longer roads in the no longer city of Bucha, wedding rings in the pockets of denazifiers, a cross necklace, children's jewelry, pendants made of women's earlobes with earrings torn from them on some keychain with the keys from some new apartment, so that they can cross the liminal threshold of our small bedroom and say, hi, my uncle is in Minsk Special Forces and I live with you in this room of the university dormitory on Vitebsk Street, just across the police station. I read about every next day in the news, served as a regular breakfast, Nothing regular about this particular breakfast. It's not taken for granted. There's only this one and the next one and the one that we'll not have time to ingest. Pain tastes like a fizzy drink, climbs up the throat, looking there for a way out, shining through all blood vessels, pulping the skin from the inside in the form of outgrowths, abscesses, tumors, and blisters. Each time you wish me some strength, it bursts out. You confess there is nothing more you will do. After selecting the program, spin speed, and temperature regime, you leave the room, you put on your headphones, you turn the TV up in your grandmother's room, so you don't hear how the spin cycle rattles in the machine like this. In this room, where we still daily have breakfast, both having lost the key and being locked up by it, where I cannot find anything to respect about you, not even your honesty. Thank you. And there is also one more poem I would love to read. This is a poem by Ukrainian poet Danik Zadorozhny, whom I translate in English. Choose your words carefully, like they're shrapnel in the children's playground, like they're glass shards that you need to remove from a wound before talking to us about all this from your native Moscow, Toronto, or Riga, while you're marking, let's say, messages of those reporting from Ukraine by adding the foreign agent label on it, and then erasing addresses of prepared bomb shelters and temporary administration, you understand what we're talking about, no matter the language, mova, yazyk. Why is that so? Too late for some words and too early for others. Anything marked by emergency, elderly, children provides further impetus for those occupiers. So don't let them find our weak side. Their honor is to aim for vulnerability, to take revenge on whoever was never involved, to attack the weak or those who seem to them weakened. What did they bring to his desk in those worn out folders? Their honor, leaving own people behind, preventing survivors from being rescued after a friendly hail of rockets, burying them under the rubble, burning them in the mobile crematoria, snatching their remains out of a stray dog's mouth. Have you heard about Bucha? Have you seen Bucha's photos? After reading Barthes and Zontak, you'll see even more cities like this. You'll meet more people, burned, not yet buried, hands tied, murdered, raped, tortured, left to die in the robbed apartments and in the wrecked civilian cars, like in Kiev suburbs. And before, just like us, he too watched how hospitals burned in some eastern country from which their army exodus should have happened 3 times, yet it didn't for once, leaving the burned music of some German classic named Wagner in place, bombing the drama theater for their army to watch such a show of a new frozen campaign. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to both of you. I want to start off with a question about, something both of you talk about in your bios or address in your bios, and that Anna specifically writes about in her work, and Yuliya, I think you write about this in other pieces, and that's your own kind of migration as a result of discrimination and persecution by various governments, right? Initially for you, Yuliya, from the Belarusian government. For Anna, you're originally from Donetsk. So I'm just wondering how you've had to be mobile and be moving from place to place amid war, discrimination, violence, and particularly how you've had to do that as women, and how you write about that. And you can, take that question and any part of that question, but I'm just very, very interested to hear.
if Anna would like to go first, otherwise. It looks like Anna might have
I
problems
think
with
she's having some
connection.
internet issues. Yeah, so we're gonna try to get her back. So if you wanna go ahead and get
Okay.
started and then.
Okay, so in my experience, I would say that prior to the invasion, me and my partner, we were living on and off in different parts of the world. And we used to be separated usually because I've been finishing my MA studies and he's been here. And in 2020, we've been living in Belarus. And then we had to leave it, and we felt that we might not come back in the nearest future because of the safety issues, and because Danik wrote a poetry book that also involved reflection on what was happening in Belarus in those times, and I've edited it. And we felt that it might be it. It might be like the last thing that we would do in Belarus for a while. And so when the, like, I'm inclined to say when the war started, but the war started 8 years ago, and it's very important not to mix those things. When the full-scale invasion started, there was this very fragile sense of security and safety finally found in us being finally living together and having our future planned. And this time it happened rather spontaneously, because I came to Lviv in the end of December. By the end of my MA program, I came here for Christmas break, but in January and then in beginning of February, it became apparent that some very important political shifts are going on, and I canceled my intended trip to Minsk to see my parents, whom I have not seen since September. And I've decided to stay for a while to see what will be happening. And we decided to get married, and that was February 21st. And we had our next visit to the administration that would allow us to marry next week after that. And then there was February 24th when my husband woke me up and said the war has started, like the full-scale war has started. And the first thing that I saw was a CNN video of tanks moving from Belarusian border. And that of course was very shattering. That's like a double unimaginable thing to live in a country that's in this full-scale state of war, and to know that your country is on this side of the aggressor, and you happen to be in between those things. So of course, like there's been a lot of intersections, and in my experience as a woman, as a Belarusian, like all of them intertwined during what I was experiencing. But basically, like my mobility became very suddenly my stability, because I decided to stay here, because Danik is not allowed to leave Ukraine in any case, because a Ukrainian man cannot leave Ukraine because of the war state. And I just knew that that's it, like we are going to be here for a while, we are going to see what happens there. And luckily we're in Lviv, luckily we're very privileged to live here, to have a place to be, and to be in relative safety, which is not the case for many of us. And of course, for people who came from Eastern regions, it's a very different story, and I'll be very grateful to hear it now as Anna is back and her connection is hopefully stable.
Thank you, Yuliya. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if my video suddenly disappears. I'm in Lviv now, but for some reason I have unstable internet. As for me, I first met the war 8 years ago when I was 17. Therefore, my experience is an experience that stretched in time and space. I haven't had a home in 8 years. I was born in Donetsk, the city where I lived until I was 17. And for the second time, the war met me in the east as well, in Kharkiv, in the city where my parents moved because of the war, and two of my grandmothers and grandfather. One grandfather died in Kharkiv, where we buried him, although he always wanted to be buried in Donetsk next to his younger sister, who died a very young child. And you probably know about the current crimes of the Russians. They mine cemeteries. When I see these photos, it seems to me that it may also be my grandfather's grave. They try to kill the desire to remember. So about gender, I wanted to say about Donetsk at once. Donetsk is a territory that has no gender, at least for me. I would never compare my city to a woman. It seems to me that this motive doesn't exist in the Donbas context. Mine, although a feminine noun in Ukrainian and Russian, has no gender. Mine is not just a man's job. This is a city of minds and roses. And if it's not exactly about gender, but it's about something that needs to be visualized, I'm reminded of Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings, her hips, her flowers, strong steel coal. She feels it very personally in my imagination, this dust, this empty spaces, steps. I don't know, this is my personal feeling. But why is this so important to me now? Because in the conversation about gender, it seems that topics are expected in which I am not an expert. I am not a gynecologist. I am not a sexologist. And I can't talk about how the war affects civilian women from a medical point of view. I am not an ecologist, not a psychiatrist, not a military doctor. I could just talk about my personal experience, but I have another tool of influence, because there is another but I am a poet, but I am a writer, and I can talk about gender at the character level, in a particular at the semiotic level. I didn't just start with the fact that Donetsk is a city without gender for me, because in today's political context, we have this gender color. The city as a woman, say, Odessa mama, Odessa mother, the country as a woman. And not only today, it is also a Christian context. In fact, today's Russia is beyond Christian symbolism. Now Ukraine is often portrayed as a woman, both negative and positive way. And what symbolizes for us freedom, the movement for equality, liberation, symbolizes for the invaders, for fascist Russia, powerlessness. If a woman is for Russians, she is a victim. If a woman is not a victim, if she is fighting for freedom, then she wants to be captured, to take possession of it, to possess it, living or dead, rape, eventually kill or silence again. And concentration camps, hunger, threats, rape of a mother in front of children, or tie the baby to a dead mother. They are trying to break into an area that will definitely remain inaccessible to them, our life, because our femininity, even at the level of symbols, is a struggle. And there is slavish humility, fear. I thank everyone for this important topic and the opportunity to talk not only about everyday topics, because I think intellectual complexity is necessary during war, both for us and you. Thank you very much for this event.
Thank you for that really rich and generative answer. And I want to ask about something you talked about with, mining the graveyards in particular, and this desire not only to destroy the living, which is horrific, right? Not only to dehumanize and to torture, but to pillage memory and to destroy what is already gone, right? But even the impulse to remember. And I want to ask about in what way for you that relates to the impulse to write, and to particularly to poetry, if there's a way in which you turn to writing in order to remember, if they are tied, and if poetry in particularly holds something that is connected to memory. Because for me, I know it does. That is why I choose poetry as a form and genre. But I would love to hear your answer. Would you like to start us off again while Anna gets the video back?
I actually wanted to add something to what I've heard and to respond that I find very fascinating what Anna was talking about when she said how Ukraine is often compared to women, and because like I have much to relate from a perspective how it happens in Belarus, and how those narratives, gender stereotypes that often seem not very harmful and often funny when politicians compare countries to women, or when they make some remarks, again, comparing them to girls and their behavior. But since February 7th, when Vladimir Putin said that phrase "нравится, не нравится, терпимая красавица" in relation to Ukraine, which means whether you like it or not, you will comply with me, my beautiful girl, something like that. That's a state phrase in Russian language. It became not funny to the whole world who was then listening and seeing those patterns of conservative authoritarian figures, seeing other countries, other nations as some naughty girls who require regulation and control systems being put in place. And that's also the case for the Belarusian ex-president, who is not yet aware that he's an ex-president, with his rhetorics of often calling the Belarusian nation its children and presenting himself as the father of the nation, who is often disappointed with the behavior of those children, who again are portrayed as naughty, as someone who disappoints them a lot. And at the same time, he often refers to the country as a loved one, once again, as a loved woman or loved girl, right after the Belarusian upheaval and the most active protest in 2020. Lukashenko said the phrase "любимую не дают," we would not give the loved one away, which again sets us back to these rhetorics of an abusive partner, someone who doesn't want his loved one to leave. And just seeing how from those narratives, real violence and abuse and just unthinkable things that right now our Russian troops are doing in the occupied territories, it just allows us to see how those as if not harmful stereotypes and narratives nurture the actual systems of thinking and the actual modes of what is imaginable or not, what can exist or not. And that's such an alarming situation to keep an eye on, with countries being portrayed as subordinate, agency-less entities that needs regulating. That was what I was thinking while Anna was talking.
Thank you very much, Yuliya, for the words about the abuse. It was very important to say about it. As for the question of poetry and memory, about poetry and memory, for me, this is the impulse to remember and to fix as much as possible, to fix poetically in particular, because poetic memory is a special memory. It is very important to me that our poets now find the strength to write poetry, to create. It's wonderful and it hurts a lot.
And there was another question from the audience. This is very related to what you were just saying, is, amid the chaos of war, when do you write poetry? And do you, especially as you said, Anna, through, the pain of even bearing all of this, surviving it? Yuliya, when do you write amid volunteering? I know you do a lot of volunteering at the metro stations.
We've been doing that, but not in metro. Lviv doesn't have metro, but Lviv has a railway.
Really?
Yeah, so we've been doing that back in March, when it was the toughest of crises happening there, because like most of the moves between different parts of Ukraine were happening back then. And now, as we are kind of free from that type of volunteering for now, last time we both got COVID for 3 weeks. So that was kind of like the last time we went for a night shift, but it was definitely worth it, but also, of course, very draining. So actually, I don't write that often in the everyday life. Prior to the invasion, that was always the case, that I would write a poem once in a month or something like that, and be content with that. So it didn't really change. Of course, I felt very numb for the first month or so, like just generally my mental health wouldn't allow me much to do, and writing poetry wasn't a thing that back then was thinkable. But starting from the end of March and then April, I kind of came back to my pace of writing a poem once a month. So for now, it's been working on for me. And yeah, because it feels like it is and I want to believe that it is an important work to be done in the moment, because these reflections of what is happening, they need to be captured in various forms. And of course, there are some media that is very utterly important, like news resources, like interviews with the people who survived occupation and came from the most endangered regions, and those materials should be read by everyone. But also artists and poets who are doing their job, they're also documenting what is happening. So I definitely felt that there is value and worth in what I'm doing, and that this memory keeping job is the most important thing that there is to do after you're done with volunteering and you've done the most immediate help that you can do, because there's been like a lot of things to do with finding help for other people, providing shelter, providing help to those who need it. And then you come home and write a poem. That felt like the right thing to do. So that was the reality for me.
As for me, I was able to write only in Lviv. Until then, if it gave me strength, I could do it physically. I almost couldn't. The first days in Kharkiv, I tried to keep a diary, but when I heard the fights over my head, I couldn't. Physically, although I know people can. I can hardly even read, not just write. But then I felt this strength and need. I felt that I had to write, and I could. I don't want the war to take away our voices, our ability to think, to the philosophical point of view. But I was able to write only in Lviv.
We had a question in the audience asking what you want people outside of Ukraine to understand or to know about what's happening inside Ukraine that in your perspective, people don't seem to know. Is there something you feel the outside world isn't getting, isn't understanding?
This is a very difficult question. I know those who understand it here, but for me it is very hard now. I'm sorry. I think I don't answer this question. Sorry.
That's perfectly fine. It's a difficult question. I think it's impossible, near impossible to understand from within, let alone from outside. Yeah. We also had a question about ways through which you are disseminating your work. So many comments about how powerful and inspiring your words are, and just people wanting to know what channels you're using to communicate them to the world. I'll just say this is a channel. This is how it's happening. So I think in the last few minutes that we have remaining, I just want to end on a little bit more poetry and asking our audience to engage with some poetry. As Dr. Friedman mentioned in the beginning, there is a project that I have been working on, and Anna was gracious enough to record a beautiful translation of the Ukrainian version of the poem. And I'm going to put a link in the chat for everyone to the website. And then I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see. And I'm going to, let's see if this will work. Does everyone see my screen? Yuliya, is the screen sharing?
It's loading, like I cannot see it yet, but
Okay,
it says
but it's
it
loaded.
started showing.
I cannot see it too, but it's maybe because of my
Maybe.
internet.
So this is Dear Ukraine, which is a global community poem that provides a space for individuals all around the world to speak to the war against Ukraine. by responding to a model poem that I wrote. And we have the poem translated into Ukrainian and into Russian by two wonderful Ukrainian poets, Boris Khersonsky and Lyudmila Khersonska. And I'm just gonna read it in English, and then I wanted to ask if Anna would read the Ukrainian, and if Yuliya would read the Russian, and we can just have the three languages for you to hear. And I want to ask the audience, for those who are willing and interested to respond, to go through and share their voice. You can go through the threads, and then I can show you in real time, hopefully it has loaded now, that your response goes up on the website immediately. It is not visible, so the screen is not sharing.
Unfortunately, it hasn't loaded yet.
It hasn't loaded.
You should try.
I'm gonna
Stop
pause.
Start
Yeah,
sharing again.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna do it again. Did it share?
It is the same.
It is
There
the
is
same.
a screen and we cannot.
Okay, well then everybody can open it on their own websites because it is in the chat. That's all we can do. That's what we can do. Okay. I'm sorry, everybody in the chat who says they can't see it. Dear Ukraine, I'm so far from your earth, your dead, your suffering. This expanse is nothing but a singing wound. Still, I reach for you, Ukraine, as I drive my children to daycare and sob in my car, then go on with the day while you tug and tear at me, Ukraine, thorn, anchor, stone, seed. I want your sunflowers to rise across the water, fields and fields ablaze. Oh, someone else has just shared the screen. They'll burn anyone who dares cut them down. Dear Ukraine, you are snowfall and ash. Your water vapor and smoke hang heavy in the air. Even here they soak the earth. Take shelter, if only in this song and soil, if only for a moment. Take shelter here. And then Anna, if you would read in the Ukrainian version.
Yeah, thank you. I need I need 1 second.
No problem.
Україна, рідна, я так далеко від твоєї землі, від загиблих твоїх, від твоїх страждань. Весь простір твій, лише одна суцільна рана, що співає. Україна. Та все ж я душею з тобою, і коли зранку везу дітей своїх до школи, я плачу в машині, і протягом дня ти вриваєшся в моє серце, твій біль мучить мене, Україна, каменем, зернятком, якорем, гострим шипом. Я хочу, щоб твої соняшники піднялися над полями та водами, залитими світлом. Тож нехай споколиться світло кожного, хто наважиться їх зрізати. Україно, рідна ти і попіл, і сніг, Випаровуються води твої, і важкий дим висить над країною. Навіть тут повітря просякнуте димом. Утайся, знайди притулок, нехай хоча б у цій пісні, на цій землі, нехай хоча б ненадовго сховайся і знайди притулок тут.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your wonderful poem, Yuliya.
It's so moving to hear it in Ukrainian. It makes me really emotional. And if everyone wants to, whoever wants to, if you want to go to the share your voice link, and then you can go through and write a response, and we can, you know, the program is coming to its end, so we can give you a couple of minutes here to just reflect on what you've heard from Anna, from Yuliya, and write it down. And then, Enrique, I think you were able to share the screen. If you want to just share the screen again with the responses, and then as you refresh them, people can see the responses come up.
If I can just then express a thank you for sharing this beautiful poem, because we listened it today as we were cooking breakfast, and we just took a minute and a half to stop and to put on a recording in Russian and listen to it. And it has this beautiful quality of being both melodic and sounding very appealing and comforting, but also being very discomforting and very piercing and very uneasy. And I think that's a beautiful mixture of senses, of sensual information that we are to receive at the moment, when we all need some comfort to find in these times, but we also need to stay very acutely aware and very careful with how we proceed with our so-called normal lives, when in Ukraine there has been no such a thing, at least since 24th of February, and even prior to that, for those who lost their home, as Anna has said, twice by now, since 2014. And I think this poem does a great job in bringing all those issues in. And the website is obviously very beautiful. It just impresses very much how it works and how the idea is very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yuliya. That means more than you know. And I would love if you can share among Ukrainian speakers, among Russian speakers in Ukraine, because the whole point of this is to begin a dialogue. And this is just the beginning of this project. We really want it to be much bigger and to begin a pen pal program. There's many ideas for this project, of it going much further than just this. You know, this is just the first step. So I would love to see the responses start popping up in Ukrainian and in Russian, and for this to just keep growing.
Yes, and the different realities of Yuliya's poem help to feel it better, because melody in other languages is in different realities. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you both so much for giving so much of your time to us. We cannot thank you enough. We send you all of our solidarity, and I know I speak for so many of us. I know Susan is typing it in the chat that we feel helpless in everything that we do. We are trying. But we feel that it is not enough, that everything we write and everything that we organize is not enough, but we are trying, and we are with you. As I say, dushoy, you know, even though we are far, we are thinking of you, despite it not being enough.
Thank you so much for keeping doing that. I think that might be the answer to the question that we both didn't have any answer to. What should foreigners understand or think more about? Is that this war will be a very long one. It will take much more time. It will take more lives. There will be much more devastation and loss ahead of us. Even at this point, nearly every Ukrainian family has some kind of loss in their life. And we all have relatives and friends in different parts of the country, and it is happening each minute. And the moment that the rest of the world keeps silent, it is a sanction for it to continue and to become more and more hostile. And that happens all the time. When some global crises happen, at some point the world gets tired of it, because that's just how the human psyche works. And we all witness it vast majority of world's conflicts, and how it kind of got frozen at some time. We were all devastated, for example, last summer when the crisis in Afghanistan happened, and everyone was watching it. And now it is still the case. And again, the gender issue, the millions of Afghani women are suffering because of the Taliban right now, and they've been banned just recently from coming to the streets without having had their head and had their face covered. And that's the reality for them now, and yet the world is silent about it now. And the thing that all Ukrainian poets and Ukrainians are afraid the most is that the world will get tired of what is happening here, and it can happen any day, and that people would just want to brush it off their daily routine. So this event, however, like maybe small it feels in the moment, I feel that the persistence of what you do is the most important thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We must keep writing, keep fighting, keep in whatever way we can.
Thank you. It is very important today to feel support and understanding, and I think for both of us, for Yuliya, for me, for all of us who want to hear and understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rebecca, do you have any final words to send us off?
Only, I didn't mean to even be on the screen, but only to say thank you so much for sharing your voices and your beautifulness and your poetry and your time. And thank you also to Yuliya for connecting us, and for the Dear Ukraine project, which I think will keep the engagement longer than it might have, right? That will be an instrument, a mechanism for keeping the engagement and keeping this Ukrainian war top of mind around the globe, as it should be. And I agree with all of the other conflicts as well, but this one. So thank you for that, all of you, for your involvement in that. Look forward to bringing that forward as much as we can here in Miami. So thank you. That's all.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Good night to everyone.